Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is going to be another Wii U centered video, and I know I've had quite a few of these, so after this one, I'm going to try and push something else out that's not Wii U centered. So, today, I'm pretty sure you've seen the thumbnail and the title, obviously, so today's video is going to be about the relationship between the Wii U and the Dreamcast. And it's a very interesting relationship because they are very similar consoles. I mentioned this briefly in a previous video, um, but I want to talk a little bit more about it now. Um, Now, my main point that I made back then is that the consoles both have sort of the same backstory behind them. They were subject to the previous console's mistakes. They sold around the same amount of units. They both have fantastic games, and they just don't have good advertising to get the console out there and get it into homes. And so I'm going to go in depth into, all of that stuff. And I'm going to start out with the whole previous console's mistakes sort of thing. So let's get on to the first topic of this, and that's the backstory behind the consoles. And I already mentioned this just about however long ago, that both the Dreamcast and the Wii U suffer because of the previous console's mistakes. And for those of you that don't know, the Saturn actually suffered from the 32X's mistake because people were like, well, I mean, kind of, because the people had the 32X, very few people, mind you, and it was an add-on for the Genesis, and it was very expensive. I believe it was somewhere around the range of $250 or something like that. So they bought that, and then all of a sudden, there was an internal dispute in Sega to release the Saturn over here in America, I do believe. And so they released the Saturn. And they drop it on us. There was a press conference, and then all of a sudden, they just drop it on us. There was no like, oh yeah, it'll be coming out, in a couple months. It was like, no, right now, it's in store shelves now. Buy it, go ahead. And so people were sort of like, if the 32X just came out, why the hell am I going to buy a new console if the 32X is brand new and I just dropped a crap ton of money on that? Why would I go buy a Saturn? And so that drove people away. And then with the Saturn, what drove people away is, you had this really expensive console, the Saturn, so people bought that. And then a very short time later, Bernie Stolar, who was in a managerial position at Sega, said that the Saturn is not our future. And that was basically just another way of saying, fuck the Saturn, we have to move on from that. That's screwing us right now. That was one of the worst things that anyone could have ever said in the gaming industry ever, because what that does is that takes all of your customers' confidence, your investors' confidence, and it throws it out the fucking window, and it's gone. And so people jumped ship from Sega. And then they went on to release the Dreamcast, which is by far the greatest Sega console ever. Well, you could dispute that, whether that's, Genesis or Dreamcast, but I prefer Dreamcast, obviously. So they released the Dreamcast, and because of their prior mistakes with the 32X and the Saturn, respectively, no one fucking cared. No one bought one except for 10 million people that did, but for a console sale, for a console sales total, that's not good. That's very, very bad if you're only selling 10 million units. So that's what happened with the Dreamcast. Now, with Nintendo, it's a bit different. Nintendo, when they released the original Wii, they marketed towards casuals, and pretty much everyone knows this. They marketed towards your grandparents or your parents or people that nowadays play Candy Crush on their fucking phone. That's who Nintendo marketed the original Wii towards. They didn't market it towards gamers. They just marketed towards the everyday person who has no real interest in gaming. And so those people bought into it because they buy into fads. That's just how they are. They're like, oh, cool, this is a cool new thing, and blah, 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 that's, Wii bowling, And so they bought into that whole craze. And then that faded away for them. And then for everyone else that did buy it, because they were hyped as gamers, the gamers that bought it, they bought it, realized how bad it was, and then they just sort of like put it on the shelf and it collected dust. Me personally, I'm sort of like neutral on the Wii. I like it, but I don't necessarily dislike it, but I don't very highly regarded as like the greatest console ever. It's just sort of like, it's okay. But Yeah, the Wii made that mistake, and then by they made that same mistake. They lost the trust of the gamers, of the people that they should be targeting their audience, of the the audience they should be targeting. Sorry, and as a result, the gamers jumped ship on Nintendo, and they said, "Fuck that! I'm not gonna do this. I'm gonna go get an Xbox 360, PlayStation 3 instead." And admittedly, they probably would have done that anyways, but now to a much higher extent. So they just sort of pushed away from Nintendo, and then Nintendo just sort of like, back to being like that, shit company that no one cared about. That's what happened, and now you move on to the Wii U, and it's the same thing that happened with the Dreamcast. People just don't care because they lost faith, because they think they've just moved on, or they screwed up and they don't care about gamers anymore. So it's sort of that same sort of thing. And that's really interesting that Nintendo sort of didn't see that one coming, because I don't know, but you think they would have learned from Sega with the Dreamcast, but they didn't. And that's right there is one big reason why those two consoles are very, very similar. Um, Another reason is just the fact that the games on both of them are fucking great. Like, they're fucking phenomenal. Anyone can, pick up if on either console, on the Wii U or on the Dreamcast, no matter what kind of gamer you are, there is a game on there for you that kicks ass. I guarantee it. There is a game on there that kicks fucking ass. And no one really knows about it. I mean, no one knows about it because they all jumped ship and everything that I just mentioned that before. And so they both have that same situation where they have these great fucking games, but no one's experiencing them and no one's supporting the developers behind them, which causes the developers to just sort of run home with their tails between their legs and just sort of not really exist anymore. I mean, and if they do, they go do it for other consoles where they know they're going to make more profit, and they leave, the Dreamcast and the Wii U, although admittedly the Dreamcast did have a lot of sort of, I mean, I guess it had a decent amount of third-party support. I don't know, like, a shit ton about the Dreamcast, but I do know it had some decent third-party support, whereas the Wii U is just fucking done in terms of third-party support. I mean, in 2016, I don't really think we're going to see more than 10 third-party, like, big, even semi, like, reputable games. I think it's just going to be all first-party Nintendo stuff, which is fine, because first-party Nintendo stuff is pretty much the only reason you'd buy a Wii U, so, you know. So, there's the other reason behind why those two are so damn similar, and the third, for me, is just their feel, the aura that these consoles have. It's just similar. It's very similar. Like, when I first got my Dreamcast, I had, like, a really nice feeling. It had, like, a really nice, like, come play me kind of feeling to it, and the Wii U has that same feeling to it, and a lot of the games have that feeling to them as well, at least to me, and the games are fantastic on both systems. And just overall, and this is really weird, hard for me to explain, and it's probably really weird to most people, but the two consoles, at least to me, just have sort of the same air around them. It's really weird, but they just do. So that's just sort of a me thing. I don't know if anyone else feels that or not, but they both have that same sort of feel to them, and this brings me up, this brings me over to my next point, and that's that I really hope Nintendo doesn't screw up with NX, because I think that might be their last chance. If they screw up with NX, and I think that's the end for those guys, because, I mean, if they screw this up, then what chance do you think they'll have afterwards if they haven't learned from the Wii U, So, yeah. And there's plenty of other things I could go into as to why these consoles are so similar, but I want you to sort of, like, think about it yourself, and I want to hear from you guys in the comments, for, like, the two of you that actually watch through these videos. I want to hear from you guys, and I want to see if you agree with me on this, and I want to, hear your opinion on the matter, and see if you get that, like, weird feeling that I do about the Dreamcast and the Wii U. So I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. I'll talk to you later.